I've been talking about this for a couple of years, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's like the rolling ball that just keeps growing. So I think there's a couple of things that every healthcare system needs to think about, and this is whether you're a hospital, whether you're a physician practice, it really doesn't make any difference. And number one is we now have options that we did not have before, and especially in the hospital setting. Historically, the relationship between the hospital and the medical staff was purely medical staff governing documents. So the doctor is allowed to practice. You have to go through the fair hearing process in order that the doctor can be taken off of the medical staff, and that was the only option that you had. Now we're seeing everybody employing docs, and the projections as they come out is like 70+% of the docs that are coming out of medical school today are saying, I'm going to be employed. They do not want the hassles. They do not want, and their parents are telling them, do not go into private practice, get employed, do what you want to do, which is to care for patients. Let your employer deal with all of the billing issues, all of the fraud and abuse issues, all of the Stark issues. Just this way you can practice and maybe even have a family life. I know that's a big deal, but that is what you need to be doing. So employment now, as compared to when we did it in the 90s and it was a borderline disaster, is very, very different. Everybody's learned the lessons. What that means is that now you have options in terms of what are you going to do when you have problems with a physician? It could be clinical care, it could be professional behavior, it could be compliance in terms of billing issues, it could be pursuant to a contract issue. And so we have more options, and what the trick is to figuring out how to know which option to use. So the second point is, number one, we know we now have options we didn't have, and as we all know, it's much, much easier to say, you're fired, as compared to saying we now have to go through a $50,000 fair hearing process to get rid of somebody, but that can create some real tensions and problems with your medical staff in terms of saying, oh yeah, you're just going to get rid of this person by contract, and now this guy who's a really bad doctor is going to go down the street and operate on Aunt Martha. And so there has got to be these discussions between medical staff leadership and hospital leadership, which is the triaging issue, which is number two. And we have to learn that we need to be able to capture issues at the very beginning. We need to be able to create some type of quality committee or a quality department process whereby whenever any issue comes in, dealing with someone who has privileges at the hospital, employed or unemployed, as the case may be, that you can say, this is an HR issue. This individual is harassing nurses. We're not going to have peer review privilege anyway. We really want to have a good record if EEOC shows up. So this is something we're going to let HR handle because we're very concerned about the nursing staff and how they're going to deal with this. This is a clinical care issue. It should go to the medical staff. Let them handle it. We have a situation where the doc might be doing medically unnecessary procedures. That might be two things. It might be it needs to go to compliance for the billing piece because you only have 60 days to self-report if you realize you've got a problem, but it also might be a medical staff issue because we need to look at were these appropriate procedures. So we need to create, and we've been working with a lot of hospitals, and it just keeps growing in terms of saying, here we go, we need to triage, create a triage process to be sure we're getting it to the right place or both places at one time to get it taken care of. And then the final piece of this is, if peer review makes sense in the employment setting, in the medical staff setting, doesn't it make sense in the employment setting? And Ohio has a really good peer review statute. Before, you only had liability for negligent credentialing. Now you have vicarious liability because you're employing these individuals. And so to not have a peer review process on the employment side of the equation is just dumb, because that's the way you are best going to find out if you have problems or not, but not be creating a beautiful argument for the med-mal plaintiff who comes in and says, why did you fire Dr. Jones? We fired him because, he was really doing lousy record keeping and he hurt 3 patients, blah, blah, blah. If we can protect that, doesn't that make sense? And so we've been working with a number of hospitals with their professional corps to actually create peer review processes in the employment side of it, which just makes good sense.